Hello, and welcome to Yogahub podcast, where we bring you conversations with some of the world's leading yoga and movement educators. In this week's episode, I am chatting to Miles Mortenson. Miles is a yoga teacher based in London. Originally from Australia, he was exposed to yoga at a young age through his mother, who also taught the practice. But it wasn't until moving to London in his 20s to be a DJ that he was eventually drawn into both the therapeutic and physical benefits of the practice. Known for his dynamic style, which incorporates elements of mobility and hand balancing, Miles' classes focus on helping people explore freedom of movement as well as strength. We are very lucky to be hosting Miles for the first time here in Dublin at Yoga Hub in November for a weekend of workshops, which promise to be a pretty fun and educative time. You can find out more information in the description below. But for now, here's my conversation with Miles, and thank you very much for listening. All right, sweet. So, Miles, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to come on and have this chat. I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better. I always like to begin with what I consider to be the most important question of the day, which is, how are you doing?
Thanks, Brian. Likewise, appreciate it. Thank you for having me here. And I'm doing good. It's a sunny day here in London. We just had a beautiful weekend away with some dear friends in Switzerland. So batteries are recharged and ready to go back into the week, which is a really nice feeling.
Nice. I'd say it's a bit of a shift, Switzerland to London, a bit of a change in energy.
Yeah, for sure. It's going from very chill, being able to see the stars, quiet nights, to back into a bustling city, and you hear people running around and foxes running outside your house and all the rest. But it's good. So I'd
love to begin, for anyone listening who maybe isn't super familiar with you at this moment in time, by giving you the opportunity to maybe fill us in as little or as much detail as you would care to share on you and your background, maybe what you were doing pre-yoga stuff, and how your yoga and your teaching career has progressed so far.
So I'm a movement, yoga, hand balancing, flexibility, mobility teacher, I guess, all rolled into one under the umbrella of yoga, let's say. And I grew up in Australia as a surfing kid and got stuck into the DJ world, which is why I moved over to London and was actually a cook and barista here for a few years, and while supporting the DJ lifestyle. Fell into yoga as a way to combat nightlife, and really just became entranced and fascinated at the way people moved, the curiosity towards a different consciousness or philosophy of living, so to say, and how this could be explored through breathing, movement, sitting still. And yoga became a way for me to understand myself through, cliche to say, but hard times. Especially as kind of like a young 25, 26-year-old in the middle of the city, when you'd spent time doing things that maybe weren't so productive or healthy for your mind and body. Became obsessed with yoga, went and did my teacher training, and it kind of snowballed from there. And now I'm just about to pack up my life in London to start a new chapter after 13 years of being here, and travel around teaching and doing a lot of online inversion coaching, which has been super rewarding and fun. So I'm excited to start this next chapter.
Hey, best of luck to it. That is exciting. How are you feeling about leaving London? Are you excited or a little apprehensive? Or
I'm ready. I'm definitely ready. I'm excited. When we made the decision, it was like I felt my whole nervous system just because it was on our cards for a while. And I think London always has a place in my heart, but I knew it wasn't where I wanted to be home for the next chapter, so to say. And it's done so much for me, from being 20 to now 32, 33 soon. And now it feels like, okay, recently engaged to my fiance, and we are wanting to build a life. So it's kind of like, the release into whatever comes next. But yeah, you always have the bittersweet side things of, the students, the community here, the teaching, the level of quality of that. So, but also excited to see whatever else happens.
Yeah, the life of a yogi nomad. Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah, it'll be fun, I'm sure. You mentioned surfing, and
Yeah.
I know so many surfers who have become yoga teachers. And I'm always, as someone who has tried surfing, but I'm not very good at it. And the first time I tried surfing, I'd been practicing and teaching yoga for a while. I'm decent with balance, hand balancing, handstand kind of stuff. So everyone kept saying to me like, "Oh, you're going to be really good at surfing." And I remember in my head thinking like, "Yeah, I'll probably be okay at surfing." I skateboard and stuff like that. And I was so not good at surfing. Like I was so terrible, and I'm still like not good at surfing. I don't do it often enough to get good, but still that kind of instant like, oh, I'll just step on this board and be surfing didn't happen at all. But I'm still really fascinated by the link between yoga and surfing, because there does seem to be some like strong parallels and crossovers. So I'd love to get your thoughts on it if you wouldn't mind sharing.
I mean, where I grew up was on the northern beaches in the Avalon. It was very, I guess, health conscious community, right? And my mom was a yoga teacher, and my stepfather at the time was, he was heavily involved in the surf industry and kind of like a surf coach and stuff like that. So yoga, I guess, was the kind of complementary practice to a lot of the surfers. So my mom would teach a lot of the young teenagers growing up. She'd teach me and my friends kind of growing up. So it was really kind of this thing, I guess, that was embedded into the community. And the, I guess, consciousness side of it is like a lot of surfing is very meditative. You know, you're out in the water, it's very still. You have that raw connection to nature, let's say. And the feeling of being on the wave is what I believe is yoga, what it's about. Like whether you're practicing asana, running, hand balancing, surfing, skating, it's about flow state, union, connection to mind, body, breath, and all the rest. So I think what people find in between is that you can have those similar states in between both. It's just, you know, the yoga is there to help create space and movement into the body so that you can direct the body energetically when you're on that wave, so things are healthy and there's not injury, you know. So it's and I think there's just, you know, kind of what you said before, that yoga nomadic lifestyle, like surfers are a little bit, let's say, rebellious to society, wanderers, wild. And if you go back to when it all began, they were definitely the off-piste people of society, so to say. And I think that was very much the same in yogis, you know, traveling to India, disappearing, and it was this like fringe activity. And I think in some way they're both just married together, you know, that you have that hippie cliche, so to say.
You mentioned rebelliousness, and I'm interested in your mother being a yoga teacher. So I've got two young kids. I've got two daughters, and I would love for them to practice and explore and do yoga if their interest lies there, of course. But I'm always interested, you know, like there can be a tendency for kids to rebel against their parents.
Yeah.
And if like me as like a yoga teacher, someone's interested in this stuff, will they have a bit of a like, you know, that's not cool because dad does it, you know what I mean? And so how did you find growing up with your mother as a yoga teacher? Was that something that drew you to the practice? Was it something that maybe put you off the practice in some shape or form? Or, yeah, how did that go for you?
I don't think it ever put me off the practice, but it definitely helped me come to it when I actually came to it at a later stage in life, so to say. But definitely growing up, I would never say that I had a practice. You know, mom would take us maybe to workshops and events, and she'd do Christmas intensives and stuff like that. But we were surfers. Like my dad was and still is like crazy swimmer. My stepdad, like surfer, always in the water at the time. So yoga, you know, was very like boyish culture, rugby players, all of this, like we were kind of around. So yoga, especially kind of in Sydney, it was a lot more gentle, hatha based, stylistic kind of flows. And being 13, 14, it's like, this doesn't really interest me that much. I want to go skate and cause mayhem and surf and hang out with boys and do all of this stuff. And it wasn't until I was kind of mid-20s that I saw, practitioners like Dylan Werner, Mark Roberts, Daniel Ramos doing all this crazy stuff that I was like, wait, what is this different style of yoga? But then even when we were kids, it's like jumping into crow, going upside down were fun things that we experimented with, but it wasn't like, I'm going to go practice yoga with mom. But there wasn't a rebelliousness of like side either. It was just like, I don't want to do that. I want to go and surf. What are you talking about? But I think having that influence, growing up, a lot of friends' moms did yoga. There was a lot of like yoga aesthetic decorations, or so to say, like Buddhism around the houses and that we lived in and friends' houses. So there was always this ideology surrounding me. And so when I started to explore it, it was a very easy transition, familiar state to come to versus like, oh, this is a whole obscure world that I know nothing about. And so, yeah, it was a thing that we did, but it wasn't uncool, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I think it's super good for kids to get into, and it's, I always think though with the young boys, it's like what really drew me into the beginning was, you said you have young girls though, no?
I've got 2 girls.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, as a guy, I was very much like, I want to do all the strength and strong stuff, where I think for women, they might want to do all the flexibility and da-da-da. And I don't know, it's, I think it can so depend on the kid, because some kids really resonate with their parents of like, yeah, I want to do everything dad or mom does. And other times they're like, I don't want to do anything of that.
Yeah.
But mom never really pushed it on us either, like in a sense of you have to go and do it. It was like, hey, come on, no, this will be good for you. And you find your own way with it. Like my brother, he's a professional surfer, but yoga's never really interested him in the same way that it has for me. So, yeah.
And do you mind me asking? We'll touch upon your approach and your style of practice a bit more later. But for those people that know you, they probably know you from more like dynamic and challenging aspects of the practice. Do you mind me asking how your mother feels about your practice? Does she have any opinion on it?
She's been amazing in supporting me in this. Both parents really have, and it's she came to my retreat in Portugal and did all the crazy, stupidly long 2-hour classes. She just did her thing in it, and she was almost going to come to my Peru training this year as well, but she had some life shifts of moving house and just figuring. So, but she's always just like, wow, look at you doing it. And it's been really helpful having both parents come from quite strong physical movements where, my mom does Pilates and walking and yoga pretty much most days. Dad is up at 4:30 a.m. and going to swimming, rain, hail, or shine 365 days a year. So to kind of, they love to see, even though I'm on the other side of the world, what I get to do with all of those things. And mom's always been like, you are the kind of person that needs these strong physical practices. Because there was a point as a teenager, I kind of fell off the bandwagon a little bit, so to say. And she would always push me to go and, you need to go and move. You need to go and move. And, that's more when I would rebel. And my movement was more 7-8 hours on the dance floor, so to say. But yeah, she's always been super cool in that, and like recognizing that I'm someone that needs vigorous and physical movement to regulate my mind and body. And
you mentioned a little bit earlier that when you kind of properly came to the practice, it was people like Dylan Werner and these dudes who are so unbelievably capable physically, that was what kind of sparked your attention a little bit. So yeah, I'd be curious to know, as you say, you were kind of exposed to the practice throughout your life, but the moment when it kind of clicked, what was it exactly that drew you in? And for someone who's been practicing and teaching for a while, how and if has that, well, it's not the right way to say it, how has that shifted over the years, or has it shifted, or is it maintained the same?
I think what drew me into like those guys initially was seeing a guy do it. Excuse me. And then seeing a guy really go through these like wild movements. Like I never really seen handstands and arm balances or these back bends strung together in a way. My influence has always been probably from the more feminine and gentle perspective, where all of a sudden I'll see these guys like that were, strong, well-bodied and all of these things. I was like, oh, cool, I want to do that. And I think yoga was really the first thing I came to with a level of confidence that was, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. Where a lot of the things in my past was, I'll never be able to achieve that. Or there just wasn't the confidence to go after it. And so that kind of helped me put the pieces together of like, I really just want to go after this and move my body. There wasn't really a goal. I knew I wanted to teach. Like as soon as I started practicing, I was like, I want to teach this. And it was like going into the training with that intention. And I definitely think my relationship to yoga has changed over the years. Like this is a conversation I've been having with myself recently, is like, what is this practice for me? Because of its philosophies resonated with me very strongly at one point. And now it's, I think, a healthy questioning to, but in a way of like, okay, I'm a man, 32 now, setting up a life, potentially wanting kids in the future and about to become a husband. And there's just different philosophies intertwining into my vision. And also the movement aspects of really getting into hand balancing and contortion and strength and flexibility training. And I think yoga is, if we dilute it, like asana as a whole is a very beautiful practice, but it's not a complete practice for longevity. And it's, looking at the context, of course, of which it came from, of young Indian boys moving around, which is perfect, great. And that method served my body for a while, when now something else makes me feel better and serves me. And I always relate it to people where a swimmer will still go to the gym because they need strength and conditioning to support their swimming practice. They need that. And I think us as yoga practitioners need these other modalities to really support our yoga practice. And I always see the asana, I didn't really get into the Ashtanga route. I've really fallen more into vinyasa. So I love the creativity and fluidity and movement that comes into it. And I really see it as like, let me move in these ways so when I get onto the mat, I'm flowing, I'm able to move and express. And that doesn't mean everything has to be perfect, but it's not as kind of clunky as I feel sometimes Ashtanga could be. But, in the same boat, I love so much of the Ashtanga, the Trishtana, the methodologies that are placed within it, the breath count and all of that. But yeah, I'm in a weird phase at the moment of like, okay, not weird, but questioning phase of what is this practice? And I think this should be really healthy for people to go through, of like question everything that we know and question the things we don't know as well. Like, don't take anything by law, interpret it. What does it mean? Because then we can teach. And even if you're not a teacher, but practice and experience from our own lived experiences versus this is what it says and this is the way it has to be done. But yeah, my practice right now is way more, I have this stupid goal of one-arm handstand. So everything is handstand focused, and I'm enjoying a lot more gym and mobility work at the moment, but I'm still practicing asana. 2 times a week, 3 times a week. And I think it just takes different forms as we move through life, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you kind of look at the development of, let's just limit it to the physical practice of yoga, like it's always contextual,
Yeah.
shaped by its time and place, and the Ashtanga method, as you mentioned, like very heavily influenced by, a military college in Mysore teaching,
Exactly.
teenage Indian boys, and that's fantastic. But a lot of us in this part of the world, at least, are not teenage Indian boys practicing yoga. And I think even in the frame of like an individual's life, that context is going to shift, and your practice ideally is something that shifts with you. The intention of the practice might be a constant, but what you actually do naturally should shift and change, and things like that. And you were mentioning other modalities, and I think you're very well known for your kind of integrating mobility aspects into like traditional styles of practicing yoga.
Yeah.
So I'd love to pick your brain on it a little bit. How do you define mobility? How do you feel it differs from traditional approaches to asana, and why do you think it's so complementary to it?
So, I mean, the scientific definition of mobility, it's the range of motion within the joint, and the flexibility is the length that we can apply into the muscle. And I see it as this way of mobility as freedom of movement. It's freedom of expression. And I love strength. I love flexibility and the ability to control, because what I see so much in the yoga world is passiveness and injury. And it's when I started, I was someone who was not flexible in any way, shape, or form. And my body reacted well to these forms of training, but really I had to grind so hard, and just passive yoga stretching got me so far. And I was like, okay, if I introduce these other modalities, I can progress so much quicker. And as a byproduct, I feel so much better in my body. And my theory was that I was, okay, gymnastics, dance, circus, all these other people use conditioning to achieve postures. Whether you want to call front splits Hanumanasana or front splits, it is a front split. And it seems in yoga, we're only going towards the front splits and hoping that something's going to happen. And that'll get you so far. But to get those last, 2 bricks down or whatever it is, unless, you're one of those few percentage that your body just reacts from that, you need to implement other things. And also for a longevity of way. So I was like, okay, if this is what these people are doing, and they do this on a professional high level, why would I not be doing this to work with these areas of my practice as well? And so a lot of this was just born out of curiosity into how the body can move. And, through my time is like explored weightlifting, calisthenics, strength training, digging a lot into contortion, because I was like, okay, these guys do backbending for a living rather than just going into Kapotasana. How can I train the body so it doesn't hurt, how it doesn't feel bad, and you feel good the next day? And this was also what I noticed is like, oh, I can now go to class or wake up the next day and feel good in my body, not that I stretch my hamstrings 10,000 times and now I can't do forward folds. So yeah, I think it became a personal exploration. And then over the years, it's like most of my work was privately teaching people. And this kind of exaggerated that even more, where people came to me for skill development and strength and mobility and stuff. So it kind of pushed me even further to start exploring these things and how they can benefit your yoga practice. And that also helped accelerate my teaching and trainings, because people came to me for drills and conditioning. It's like structured ways on how to approach things versus just kick up to pincher and something's going to magically happen one day, but it never does. And this is really kind of what is starting to come to life now is I don't really align myself with a style of yoga. So to say, like, if we have to call it something, we'll call it vinyasa, but really a methodology towards movement and practice and mindfulness, and how all of these feed into being able to do fun and cool and weird stuff, but also that you can move freely in your body without injury and without pain. And there's this huge trend online at the moment with mobility training, because I think the strength, everything goes in phases. Like at one point it was all bodybuilding, and now it's really more about mobility stuff. And it's interesting to see this shift in more and more practitioners implementing different things into their practice to see it. And, I think Mark Roberts was really one of the first people, and I could be so wrong on this, but to start to break away from the yoga world and implement, the Ido Portal method, the FRC, functional range conditioning, and all these other things to support the yoga practice and highlight the benefits of that. So this is more the school that I subscribe to, of how can we use these tools to create the outcome that we want, rather than just trying to do the thing and hoping something's going to happen. And students will have heard this analogy 1,000 times. It's like, if you want to run a marathon, you don't just run a marathon. You prepare the body, you train and train and train and condition, do certain things to get you to that point where running the marathon is going to be comfortable. Or for a Cirque du Soleil performer, they have to put the piece together to create the outcome that they want. They're not just trying to go up and do a one-arm handstand into a flag or whatever it is. They have to train the specific components. So my question has always been, why is it in yoga that we're just expected to go into middle splits or front splits or foot behind the head? And we do that just by doing it. And then all of a sudden you have a hip replacement, or you tear your MCL or ACL or whatever it is. Why is it that we neglect the preparation of the body to create the outcome that we want? And so this has been my exploration and kind of what I'm trying to iterate to people now, where it's focus less on the outcome and find the joy in the conditioning, the training, which is going to get you further along. But I think a lot of the reason why people neglect that is because, they don't want to go to the gym and things. They like yoga because it's a flow and creative and all of these things. And again, that'll get you so far. But if you want to get that extra 10, 20%, then you have to look at different things to implement, I think.
Yeah, I think it's so valuable and important. And I think I mentioned Ashtanga a couple of times, and similar to you, there's so many things that I admire about Ashtanga, and then so many things I'm sure I've said this on this podcast so many times, but anyways, I always say that Ashtanga, I like Ashtanga. Ashtanga doesn't really like me. But whenever I practice it, I just end up in bits. But there's a lot of like really valuable stuff in there. But what I also feel in the development of yoga in the West in particular over the last whatever amount of time, that one of the things that we've maybe lost from Ashtanga, which is so valuable, is the Mysore style practicing. The period of time spent practicing where it wasn't necessarily about the rhythm of the practice and was more about like what is happening in these poses. And I think probably like the studio system has, a bit of responsibility there, that like it's not so profitable to have people just in a room doing their own thing with a little bit of guidance. But that kind of work outside of the flow, let's call it, is something that I think has kind of been lost. And as you're saying now, for a lot of people, their experience of yoga is just going in and doing these flow practices where you're kind of focusing on, let's call it like the final product, and not all of the R&D that goes in behind it. So I think it's so valuable that people like you, and as you mentioned, like Mark Roberts and these guys that are actually choosing to give time and energy and focus to bridging that gap between the final product, whatever it ends up looking like for the individual, but then all of the prep that is like essential to do these things safely, efficiently, enjoyably for the vast majority of people. And as someone who, like you, I was so stiff and not flexible when I started yoga, going to flow classes when there was like, I couldn't do the majority of the stuff, but still really enjoying it, but like so much of it that I struggled with. And then finding people who were like, oh, you know, okay, this is whatever. This is your standing forward fold. This is made up of hip flexion, ankle dorsiflexion, and you can work on these things, and then all of a sudden your forward fold will get better than if you're just like mindlessly forward folding
down
over and over and over again. So no, I think this kind of new-ish branch that has kind of sprung up over the last while is it's really helping bring the practice along. And as the practice gets more widely available to people, it's important that it then also gets more widely accessible through these kind of things, which, I kind of think bridge the gap a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's natural evolution of movement as well. And it's, you know, how do we experience this? And I see more and more Ashtanga teachers. Like there's a great guy called Wade Oakley, who's incredible Ashtanga practitioner, but equally a very avid gym goer, and talks so much about the importance of reinforcement of the body through resistance training and gym work and all of these things. And I always say this thing, it's like, I want to be moving when I'm 80, 86, and whatever that looks and feels like. I think you need to do the things that you enjoy, and sometimes you have to do the things that you don't enjoy, and it's to get the results that you want. And again, this practice, so much of it was born out of Indian bodies and young boys, which are malleable and react very differently to things. It's like when you take someone from gymnastics, they start super young because the body can adapt. But if, you know, you're coming to the practice at 25, 32, or even mid 40s, the body's going to be very, very different. But I agree with you 100% on the Mysore thing, as we've kind of lost, like it became really unsexy. And I view Mysore as like, sure, it's Ashtanga, but also just self-practice. Like roll out your mat and do it yourself rather than having to rely on a teacher, because I used to love it. I haven't been the best at it recently just with how life is, but the dauntingness of rolling out your mat, but the fluidity and space that you get to explore when you just start moving and stop thinking, like that for me is more flow state than listening to, pardon me, some teacher go about things. It means I can move, tune into my body, my breath, explore it. And I think this is where vinyasa is a double-edged sword, because you don't have a set sequence to follow. You know, I think Rocket can be really good in this way, or teachers that create set sequences that give you a structured framework to follow. And I think this is also important for teachers to, you know, don't just follow other systems, create your own skeletons and then explore your capacity to move through them, because then you're actually doing it. You're able to teach people from your experience, and then you create your own voice or narrative rather than just a carbon copy of something else. But it always kind of interests me how many people are like, oh, I can't self-practice, I have to be in a room. It's like you're missing out on this wild, wonderful, untouched world of yoga and movement and human exploration. Because then when you move by yourself, you can take those moments to like sit in the postures a little bit shorter or longer, depending on how you want to experience them. But like definitely when I self-practice, it's more of a psychological warfare with myself, which I love, versus, oh yeah, I'm just here going through the motions and it's fun. And you need both. You 100% need both, I think. But there is a magic in the self-exploration that I think can so easily or is very lost now.
Yeah, I kind of sometimes think of it as when you practice, it's kind of like you're having a little conversation with yourself. You know what I mean?
100%.
And you have to talk, you tell your body to do things, but you also have to listen and respond to what your body is telling you as well. And you can use the practice to become a good talker. You can also use the practice to become a good listener. And it's not that you can't do that within the context of a group practice being led by a teacher, but I do feel that that time that you spend just talking and moving for sure, but there's a more intentional listening that comes with self-practice, which I think in many ways is where the real juice lies. And you know, all classes you go to, the goal should be just to then assist you with your own practice in many ways.
Yeah, 100%. It's like that, I think, is the practice, or a huge portion of it is that inner dialogue, right? The conversation with yourself is so crucial, because that's where you learn. It's like, you know, a gymnast or dancer can walk into a room and knock off all the asana postures and everything, but where's the mental curiosity? Like, how is, you know, how are your reactions going into a Navasana or Marichiyasana D, or the inversions? Is there negativity? Is there self-doubt? Is there nonchalance and just not caring? Are you distracted thinking about that text message that you should or didn't send, or whatever it might be, you know? And it's, yeah, I think it's hard as well, because in today's society, it's so, you know, people want to go to a class to switch off. Like, I'm so fortunate I've never had an office job. And it's like, if you're, not that there's anything wrong, that just wasn't my thing. But it's like, if you're going to an office job at 7 a.m. And then finishing at 6 p.m., the idea of self-practice is torture. You know, I had this friend, her first office meetings is 6:30 a.m. and she finishes at the same time in the evening. It's like the idea of self-practice, or even just going to an hour and a half yoga class, it's full on. So it's hard. I think to do the Ashtanga Mysore methodology, there's a quite level of, what's the word I want to say? You know, obsession there, or kind of like psychotism or whatever it is, which is great. But it's all the context of where people are coming from. And I see it all the time in London, where we have these strong practices and people are coming from super stressful jobs. And it's one side, it gives this release. And then on the other side, maybe you just need like 45 minutes of sauna and legs up the wall and whatever it may be going to be. But yeah, it's interesting. I feel so much of it can be meaning towards us to guide us back to our bodies and minds, and then so much of it can distract us from that as well.
And so on that topic, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. So you mentioned one-armed handstands being a little bit of a goal for you at the moment.
Yeah.
I'd be curious as to how you're finding it, how it's going for you. But also the kind of idea of exploring these like really challenging things, you know what I mean? Where do you find the value in that lies beyond just the physical? Because obviously you can get like super, super strong trying to do these things. And how do you kind of thread the line between the pursuit of something physically demanding and that pursuit maybe not becoming, like you were saying, just like a distraction, you know what I mean? Like a kind of a physical goal that becomes more of like a, let's call it like a little trophy on the mantelpiece, if that kind of makes sense.
For sure. I think for me, it's like I really enjoy just doing hard things. Like I need that challenge where it's like I'm going to be humbled. And Dylan Werner says this thing, it's in one of his little online classes, where it's like, if you're not practicing at a level where you're being humbled, then you're not practicing at the right level. And it's, for me, I take on stupidly hard, unnecessary tasks. And I know one-arm handstand is not going to change anything about my life, but it's really always for me what it teaches you, like the discipline, the dedication, the drive, the patience, and all of that is required to go into such a skill. It teaches me way more than the skill itself, so to say. And there's definitely a fascination. Like, I love the feeling of hand balancing and being upside down and trying to figure out these points in my body. But it's, I think this also stems back into the the level of practice that I like to practice at. It's like I enjoy something that is really hard. And yeah, I think I've always been a little bit like that. Like my mom always used to say to me, it's like, you make your life difficult, and it's areas where we can unnecessarily make it. And I think there's value in doing hard stuff. And in a society where so much, I do believe, is becoming soft and we're becoming extremely complacent, the value in taking on something that is incredibly hard is highly valuable. And it's, there's definitely been so much of ego humbling in this. Like I've wanted to give up 20 times. I've thrown bricks at the wall and just been so frustrated. And the feeling, and this is every time, it's like, can I live with myself if I give up on this? And it's like, no, I just have to keep going. And it's, I think it's like 0.5 or 1% of the world population can do such a skill. Like it's the same in handstand. It's like 3 to 5% of the world. And I think in yoga, we get used to these things that are just casual and normal. And then you step outside yoga and it's like, why are you doing this? I'll never forget doing my driver's license and my driving instructor being like, oh, what are you doing? It's like, I teach people handstand and yoga. And he's like, what? I was like, yeah, I do this. He's like, why would anybody want to do that? I was like, that's a very good question. It's like, why? But the same as someone likes to run or swim or do gym, I think handstand or one arm is just ways that we can train our mind and body and that are challenging. And it's, sure, we get that little dopamine kick. And this is what I tell to all my clients and students. It's like, I promise, once you're going to get there, you're going to have a very short-lived moment of happiness and succession, but you're straight away going to be like, all right, what's next? Where do we go from here? But for me, it's really about proving to myself the capability to do something hard. Kind of, we have the extreme end of like people like Goggins or Cameron Haynes that do these stupidly long endurance ultra marathon runs. For me, my ultra marathon is the one-arm handstand that takes 2 years rather than, however long it's taken me now, third year, 40 rather than 46 hours of running straight. But yeah, I think it's a lot of, there's the joy and fascination and exploration of being upside down, and inversions attracted me. And then there's also the playing hard and the psychological warfare that I have to go into to, bring this to life, but also the space of yoga that I find in that, the moments of perfect balance of synchronicity and mind, of breath and body. And this is what's always attracted me, is that you have to be so focused when you're upside down on what you're doing that nothing else matters. Where, I think it's the heart is relative, because if you take a beginner trying to go through sun salutations, once they start to get the coordination in, they're going to experience that same thing. But once they get to the sun salutations, okay, then we have to explore other things. And so I think it's important, as you move down your practice, you keep pushing the boundaries, because you're going to have to play it harder and harder and harder and harder. And it's like those last incremental points of progress are what take the longest. But that's where we will also learn the most. And one-arm handstand just happened to be my chosen path, so to say. But you can kind of do the same through anything, whether that's like, back bending or handstand push-ups. And a friend and teacher, Rebecca Hanna, always says it's like you have to be in a certain mindset to go after these things, because it's not a life skill as it is learning something else. It's purely for your own enjoyment. But I do believe what you learn through this is highly valuable life skills of discipline, of showing up, of educating yourself, of that connection to mind, to body, to breath. And yeah, then you get the little trophy product at the end of like, cool, I can do a one-arm handstand. But I know as soon as I get to my one arm, okay, now I need to work on this, refine it. Then there's shapes, then there's transitions. And that's what I think is also cool, is there is no end goal. You take it as far as you want to take it, but how are you okay with the bare minimum, or do you want to see how far you can go? And I think that's always been my ethos, whether it's developing my teaching, my practice, or helping push my students. It's, what's possible? How far do you want to take this? And if you're okay at this level, that's fine. You've won. You're happy. You're good. But if you're not and you want to push, let's go. Let's kind of get to work and see what's there. But yeah, I always find it curious because it's just, how far can my mind and body go?
Yeah. I did some work with Miguel Santana. I'm sure you know Miguel on hand.
Yeah, he's great.
Guy. I met him in Australia and did some work with him, and then I was doing some work with him online during COVID and stuff. But I remember the first session I did with him, he was playing around and he was doing this thing where, based on the parallettes, like the pole things, and he would go he'd be doing a one-arm handstand on the parallette, and basically in one movement he would just switch to the other hand.
Yeah. It's nuts.
Outrageous, particularly when you see it in person. You see like videos and stuff, but you see someone actually doing it in person, like, that is like scandalous. But the thing that for me at least really hit home seeing it in person is, like, physically this is unbelievably impressive, but the focus, like laser focus. And what I loved about working with him is that I remember the first session I did with him, we basically spent the first 5 minutes just in like a tabletop position with our hands on the floor, just trying to focus on our hands. And he's like, if you can't focus on it here, you're not going to be able to focus on it up there. So it's that kind of like attention to small detail.
Yeah.
Which I just found so interesting. It's like, yeah, okay, you can definitely take this stuff really, really far. But then how can you maybe also, in the reverse, apply that back down to things that are, like, on the surface very, very simple. And that's what I find really fascinating about these kind of more challenging things. Like, it's like, okay, you develop certain things within the challenging thing, but then how do you feed that back into, other things as well? Which I think is a really interesting thing to play around with.
Well, you get this beautiful, the more, as you say, the more challenging, the more pinpointed focus you have to have, but then that carries over into basic positioning, like, movements in a tabletop or a plank or even a downward dog. And you start to see these threads that weave through your practice of, like, oh, this feels similar here. So if I start to work my understanding more subtly here, that's going to help me carry upside down. And, you see really the intricacy and subtlety of these different layers. And I'm not well versed in this, but I want to say the koshas of the body. I could be butchering that so well, but those different layers of, the spiritual, the psychological, the energetic, the physical, and how all of these weave together to create that experience. And that's where it's like, people like handstand isn't yoga, and it's like, it is and it isn't. But what is yoga? Because if you really want to get into it, it's like yoga is just union. So if you want to practice ancient techniques, go live in a forest. But otherwise, it really can be kind of anything. And when we understand the capacity of what we need to apply in terms of focus and dedication to these challenging postures, we develop this beautiful understanding in the more basics of mindfulness, presence, and the subtleness of, like, okay, just moving, the focusing of the fingers, the interoception and proprioception of the body within space, like internally, externally, and how all these things move together, which then I believe brings you into a greater understanding of yourself in life, because you have this visceral connection into you. It's like coming back to home base, so to say.
There's one more thing I wanted to pick your brains about before I let you go, because I appreciate the time that you've given us today. You said your background was in music and DJing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the integration of music into yoga, which again is not super traditional. And I'd be curious to know if it's something that you do in your classes. If so, how do you feel music can complement and contribute to a movement practice? And also, if you don't, why not?
No, I definitely feed music in. For me, music is a story, and it's definitely not traditional. I think music is an enhancement. And the rare times that I do go to the Ashtanga room, I love just the breath. Like there's something magical about breath at 7 a.m. in the morning in a dark, dim lit candle room that I love. And to be honest, a lot of the time when I practice at home, I don't use too much music or use a little bit of different to what I would play in class. But I think in a classroom setting and even in self-practice, it becomes a narrative to your movement, so to say. So from a teaching perspective, it helps create a energy or room for a class. And, coming from the DJ background, your role as a DJ is to create atmosphere. You're there to take them on a journey. And, depending on what time you are slot, if you're an opening DJ, you can't be playing what should be played at 4 a.m. and vice versa. And if you're a closing DJ, a lot of the stuff is probably going to be hard and also maybe a few emotional ties towards the end. And I think within a yoga class, we can create this beautiful experience of, my classes have these big kind of warm-ups, which are half an hour to 40 minutes long, where it's like you're getting, so we have this kind of slow introduction to the beat, to the movements. And then as you start to build that heat and get a little bit more fast-paced and challenging, you have the music to mirror that, to carry you through, so to say. And for me, it's always an exploration where, as corny and cheesy as it sounds, it's like you're transported somewhere. Like you're in this dance of mind, body, and breath. But I play a lot of like kind of ethnic, organic, tribal, housey, deserty vibes. And for me, it just transports me somewhere into this kind of like wandering person going through the desert or whatever it might be. And also drops me into this state of kind of focus. And I think it's a very powerful aid in that way. And there's also beauty in not having that. I think you need that both. But the power of what you can do with music to transport people into kind of a flow state, I think is incredible. And then you apply that with yoga and, you have these two artistic forms that are geared towards taking the individual towards focus and flow. So you piece them together and it can be, a match made in heaven. Equally, it can become a catastrophic train wreck if you're choosing the wrong music, Like I remember going to a class once and they're playing Skrillex and I was like feeling like I'm having a, aneurysm or something. And it's just kind of...
It was one thing I was going to ask you, because I know it's hard to say because everyone has their own style and stuff. But
yeah,
in terms of, let's say, for newer teachers, would you have any tips or advice or guidelines that you would encourage people to follow when it comes to integrating music?
Like definitely don't just put things into a playlist. What I will listen to is really how one song transitions into the next song. Is there a coherence? Where is it kind of going? Because you also don't want to be playing a banging song when people are trying to wind down, and you kind of want to take people on an arc and a journey. So it's always think of like a slow build up into this kind of like cool down and look at how the songs interact with each other rather than just like, oh, I like this song. Oh, I like this song. Oh, I like this song. And then you put it in, but there's no coherence in between them. It's just like, it feels like your Spotify's on shuffle or something, So I always look at like how songs weave together, and, you can get into the geeky science of that, of tempo and keys and all of this. But I think that's massively helped me from my DJ career is, having the ears and like, okay, is this a similar tempo? Will this song work together? And I think about it as like, okay, if I was playing a set, would I put this song after? And And I think it's like important for new teachers is like, don't get lost in just creating playlists. Like, create some good playlists that you can edit and kind of move through. And, you know, there's teachers I know that use the same music so much of the time, and people don't really ever notice. I change it because I get bored of listening to the same songs. But I always look for consistency in beats, feeling, energy, and kind of key. You know, it's not expecting someone to be like, oh, this song's in B minor or this one's in A major. It's like, do they feel and kind of sound in a similar trajectory of where you're wanting to take the practitioner?
What is your thoughts? Because I'm not going to say I feel very strongly about it, but I feel somewhat strongly about it, is using music with lyrics in yoga classes.
It's such a bad idea.
Yeah, I just think it's, yeah.
And I think it depends like a little bit, you know, here and there. But if you're wanting to put in, you know, a song that has full-blown lyrics in it, it's a terrible idea. And it depends, like, you know, if there's a few little vocals and it's kind of, because now a lot of vocals are used as instruments. And I mean, it always was, but, you know, it's not exactly like a pop song from start to finish. So I think that can be fine. But I definitely notice if I put a song in that has maybe like spoken word through a drop or something, depending how long that drags out, it can become actually quite annoying and detrimental. But if it's like a little bit here and there, or it's more used in a soundscape way, okay. But if you're putting just, you know, like, I don't know, Justin Bieber or like a full song blown lyric thing, I don't think it's a vibe. But I also know a lot of other teachers that do, but if I always end up in a place where I'm like, it's just jarring to the nervous system. Because, you know, from a focus point of view, it's like, I'm the person where if I sit in a cafe and there's a lot of conversations going on, I find it so hard to focus on the person in front of me, where I get trapped in like 5 different conversations going in my head. I'm like, so if I have that in class, I'm like sideways. So it's just, I think it's nicer when you just have instrumental-ish music, and it becomes more of a metronome and guide that way, rather than trying to become a primary piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree. I always think with music, there's so many ways it can be used, but I think if you want to try and create it as like a container for the experience.
Exactly.
Rather than it ever becoming, you know, front and center.
Yeah.
Which
is there to be an elevation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like I could geek out with you talking about music and yoga for ages here.
Likewise, dude.
Interest of time, we might wrap it up. So we're very lucky to be having you visit us here in Dublin in a few months' time. So
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be great. First, have you been to Dublin before?
I haven't. I've been really bad in exploring, you know, kind of not the islands, UK anymore, but like Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and all of that.
Well, it'd be great to have.
But I'm excited to come up and see the countryside and city up there.
Yeah, it's a nice place to visit. So yeah, to finish, would you mind maybe giving us a small little overview of what you'll be sharing with us here, and maybe what people can expect?
So we're going to do a nice masterclass. I haven't really focused on the theme yet, but we'll figure that out. Which basically we're going to start with a beautiful warm up, go into a sequence that progresses you through a certain theme, such as inversions or backbends and that. And it's a lot of fun. I love teaching these styles where it's more ladder sequencing. So that'll be a good thing that will tie in a bit of breath work and all that into as well. And then, of course, we have the handstands. I think we're doing the transitions workshop, and we're going to take you through how to float and fly in your practice, and also find some static holding time upside down to get people feeling comfortable and hopefully not afraid of kicking up in the middle of the room or walking out and to the wall and all the rest of that.
Awesome. Well, we're very excited to have you over. It was lovely to get to chat to you today and get to
Likewise,
know
Brian.
a little bit better. Thank you very much for your time and sharing. And yeah, we look forward to having you over very soon.
Look forward to being there. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, dude.